I have been every voice.
You are the chosen one! Anakin! Anakin!
This is where the fun begins.
Inside your head.
Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Bad Batch episode breakdown. So today we got episode 3 and I absolutely loved it. I'm going to share my full thoughts with you right at the end, but let's dive straight into the breakdown. The episode starts on board the Havoc Marauder, where Hunter is once again very fatherly towards Omega, furthering the theme of parenthood. Rations are very low, but he gives her some food. Now this is where we get our first Easter egg, and it's a big callback to The Empire Strikes Back, as well as The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 2. And I'm talking about the food rations kit, a very similar one to the one that Luke had on Dagobah. All of a sudden, the ship is ejected out of hyperspace and nosedives towards a large blue moon. Once they land, Hunter and the others check the ship's controls after their comms have been knocked out. At this stage, Tech reveals that they have one capacitor left on board, and that's when Omega tries to help, but instead of the capacitor, she pulls out Crosshair's old weapons kit. This is a very emotional scene because it's very clear that the Bad Batch miss him. A big theme that's established here is, was Crosshair to blame? It seems clear that the team is divided on their opinions of what the inhibitor chip does. In the next scene, we cut to Kamino, where Crosshair emerges from a medical pod, the same one we saw him in the Bad Batch premiere, where his inhibitor chip was being enhanced. Nala Se tells Tarkin that Crosshair is responding favourably to the procedure. Suddenly, Vice Admiral Rampart appears, and he was the Imperial that we saw in a hologram on Seleucami. Tarkin asks him about the status of Project War Mantle. Now this is a major callback and Easter egg to Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Project War Mantle was one of the secret Imperial projects covered by the Tarkin Initiative. The technical schematics of War Mantle were kept at the Citadel Tower on Scarif, along with those of the Death Star and Stellar Sphere. But until this episode, we had no information about what the project entailed. Rampart tells Tarkin that everything is on schedule, and new recruits have arrived to be trained by their new commander, and this is where it's implied that that's what Crosshair is going to be, a commander to the new conscripted recruits who will eventually replace the clone troopers. Later on in the hallways, we have even more evidence that an upcoming Kaminoan Uprising is going to happen. Rampart tells Tarkin and Nala Se that there are better ways of increasing numbers of troops without the need for cloning, so then Rampart leads Tarkin to a cell and introduces him to the first elite Imperial squad. It's very clear that Project War Mantle is the initiative for the clones to train new recruits who will make up the new stormtrooper army of the new Empire. So back on the moon, Tech replaces the capacitor with Echo. That's when Echo hears a growling noise and goes to investigate. I don't know how many of you guys caught this, but this was a major callback to The Empire Strikes Back, when Han and Leia encounter Minux. And just like in this scene, Han and Leia were in a pickle with their ship. Even the oxygen masks are very similar, and so is the music. I really love this little reference because it feels so Star Warsy. It's a big connection that I never expected to see in a Bad Batch episode. Tech and Echo go together to investigate the noise after discovering claw marks on their ship. Now, something minor which I didn't really catch on to the first time I saw the episode was this very small detail which I think is going to be major in the next episode. Wrecker's head starts to hurt and he is complaining about it. He just writes it off as a small bump based on the fact that they crash landed on the moon, but it's probably a lot more than this. I will readdress this point later on in the video. So Tech and Echo come back to inform Hunter that the systems are failing, and suddenly the power goes out. They hear footsteps on top of the ship. It's the same creature from earlier. Tech then reveals to us the name of this creature. It's an Ordo moon dragon, which basically means that the moon that we're on is called Ordo. This is quite a significant detail because there is already a Mandalorian world in canon with the exact same name. Even more importantly, there is a Legends clone who was called Ordo Skirata. Formerly known as Null 11, he served as an advanced recon commando in the Grand Army of the Republic. After Order 66 was initiated by Palpatine, he deserted the Grand Army and fled to Mandalore with his family. I think naming this moon Ordo is a deliberate mention to him because there are aspects of his story which are too coincidental to ignore. For example, Ordo kidnapped some scientists from Kamino with the hope that they could undo his programming. Even more relevant to the Bad Batch is the fact that when he and his family moved to Mandalore, they continued to search for those clones who also deserted the army. Who knows, the Bad Batch might run into him and he might become canon. So back to the story, unfortunately the Bad Batch lost their last capacitor. Hunter and Omega go searching for it as Wrecker's headache persists. Back on Kamino, the conscripted recruits talk amongst themselves about how great the new Empire is and why they joined. They seem to very much resent the Republic and claim that the Empire gives them food and shelter. Watching them from a distance is Lama Su, Tarkin and Rampart, and the Kaminoan Prime Minister tells the Imperials that the new recruits will never reach the same level of military proficiency as the clones. Tarkin decides to test this, and so he requests that the clones and the recruits are sent to Saw Gerrera's camp to wipe them out on Onderon. Back on the moon of Ordo, Omega follows Hunter, and once more we have more parenting themes. Hunter shows Omega his technique for tracking, and she tries to copy him. As we saw in the previous 2 episodes, specifically in the episode Cut and Run, there is very much a father-daughter dynamic being established. In the next scene, headed for Onderon and led by Crosshair, the recruits clearly resent the clones, and one of them tells Crosshair, "It's time for a change." When they arrive on the planet, it's very evident just how competent these recruits are when you compare them to clones. Back on the moon, once Hunter and Omega find the capacitor, the dragon appears and knocks Hunter's mask off. Omega saves him, but he's unconscious, and so she decides to go after it herself. In a fast-paced change of scene, on Onderon, once the elite troopers led by Crosshair capture the civilians, Crosshair says that since they're no good to the Empire and they don't know where Gerrera is, he points his blaster at them. It's at this moment that there's a power struggle between the new recruits and their commander Crosshair. The troopers just decide to ignore Crosshair and insist that they need to be taken in for questioning and not killed. Crosshair kills that trooper and repeats his famous line, "Good soldiers follow orders." The others listen to Crosshair and kill the civilians. I personally predict the power of Crosshair is only going to get greater, especially since his inhibitor chip has been enhanced. I also think it's affecting his aggression because he's a lot more potent than he used to be. Back on Ordo, all is well after a big scare with the dragon. Omega retrieves the capacitor and Hunter is proud as he awakens to greet her. Back on Kamino, Crosshair and his troops arrive, and Tarkin is extremely impressed at how the new recruits do a much better job than the clones did. Lama Su and Nala Se are worried, and they talk about their fears of their facility closing down in light of the clones becoming obsolete. They agree that it's time to make superior clones if they're to stay relevant and needed by the Empire. The only problem is they need one clone who has the genetic material close enough to that of Jango Fett. Meanwhile, the Bad Batch finally leaves Ordo, and we have a very heartwarming ending where Wrecker has built Omega her very own little custom room and even gives her his stuffed toy Lula. So what an episode. It was absolutely phenomenal, full of emotion and character development. While the focus wasn't so much on the Bad Batch, we still got a great deal of relationship building between Hunter as a father figure and Omega. It really feels as though Dave Filoni's tried to tie some loose ends, which explains some events from the original trilogy and Rogue One. The spotlight of this episode was truly on the Imperial side of things, with the replacement of clone troopers for stormtroopers, and I personally think the Kaminoan Uprising is definitely on the brink. I also believe something very bad is going to happen to Wrecker in the next episode. The headache that he's complaining about is probably linked to his inhibitor chip and not an injury. Time will tell, of course, but something I really appreciated in this episode was just the amount of world building, and we also got a new species, the Ordo Moondragon. But I want to hear what you guys think. Did you enjoy this one? What did you make of this breakdown? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed it, guys, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, do all of that good stuff down below, and I will see you in the next one. I'm Star Wars Meg, wishing you all a phenomenal rest of the day, no matter where you dwell in the galaxy.